Welcome to Beyond the Comfort Zone Talking Shit with KING-KAMBUF. Today, we are strapping in for a deep dive that, it might sound a little like bureaucratic paperwork on the surface.
Just a little.
But I promise you, this is where the money, the liability, and really the true professional logic of architecture all come together.
That's absolutely right. We're tackling architectural records and professional practices of the services of KING-KAMBUF's Architecture Design Studios issue, 7 PcM firm organization, roles, and career paths.
So we're talking org charts, titles, responsibilities, the whole path from intern all the way up to partner.
Exactly. And this isn't just some administrative exercise. I mean, think of this as a survival guide for professional practice.
Our mission today, then, is pretty clear. We're mapping out the reality of how a firm is actually structured. All those kind of opaque titles, the reporting lines, the career jumps, and we're going to translate that into the core language of professional risk management.
Yeah.
So, essentially, who is genuinely accountable for what? Who just gets delegated the work? And how does your career from day one as an associate to maybe someday becoming a principal tie directly back to the firm's legal and financial risk?
And what's really essential here is a fundamental shift in perspective for you, the listener. If you walk into a firm and you see an organizational chart and think, oh, that's just where I report my vacation time, you are missing the single most important takeaway from our source material.
Okay.
The immediate crucial insight is this. In professional practice, organizational charts are fundamentally risk management diagrams.
Not HR fluff.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
They're designed to manage and control liability above everything else.
A risk diagram. Wow, that changes the stakes immediately, doesn't it?
So if we look at it through that lens, that professional liability-focused lens, and
Yeah.
what are the big questions that any good architectural org chart has to answer?
Right. Because if the answer to any of these is ambiguous, the firm is just legally exposed.
So the source material lays out 4 key professional questions. And if these are left unresolved, you're looking at claims, you're looking at fee erosion, or worse, non-compliance.
All right, what's the first one?
The first question is, who can promise services? We're talking scope and fee. This is the absolute foundation of contractual risk.
Okay.
If the wrong person, someone without the authority, commits the firm to, say, 20 extra hours of design work or expands the scope.
Like adding tenant fit-out documentation.
Exactly. Something like that.
Yeah.
The firm has instantly absorbed uncompensated liability. Instantly.
And that's usually where those small financial leaks start, right? That's money just bleeding out before a principal even knows what's happening. It needs to be tightly controlled.
Precisely. Which leads to the second question. Who can direct consultants?
Okay.
Directing consultants is, at its heart, a coordination and schedule task. If a junior staff member tells the structural engineer to, drastically change the column grid without first checking the architectural impact.
Or the PM schedule.
Right. And that change causes a massive delay.
Yeah.
Well, the liability for that misdirection flows straight back to the firm.
So it's not just about getting the technical stuff right. It's about controlling those contractual interfaces between everyone.
Absolutely. The third question is, who can issue or approve deliverables? This is your final quality check. It's the last gate before a drawing set hits the client, or the permitting office, or the construction site.
That role has to be locked down.
It has to be explicitly tied to a licensed professional or an executive who has that designated authority for quality control. An unapproved drawing is, for all intents and purposes, an unprotected drawing.
And the fourth question, which I think is probably the most conceptually tricky for anyone new to the profession, is all about separating the task from the ultimate liability.
Yeah, how does responsibility stay with the firm even when tasks are delegated down the chain?
Right.
This is the core professional principle you have to remember. You can delegate the drafting of a complex parapet detail to a really talented intern. That's necessary for efficiency. But you cannot, under any circumstances, delegate the ultimate professional liability for a faulty detail or a non-compliant one, or one that's just incorrectly coordinated. The org chart has to show that chain of command, the required sign-offs, the checks and balances that guarantee the standard of care is met, no matter who physically drew the line. Accountability always stops at the top.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We've established that firm structure is really all about minimizing risk and maximizing control, and that's often in a battle with the need for speed.
Always.
So let's look at the 3 main ways firms structure themselves, the 3 organizational species, if you will, to manage that trade-off between strict control and market efficiency.
Yeah, and the 3 structures we see really do represent 3 different philosophies for managing that tension. If you choose maximum safety, You absolutely sacrifice speed.
And if you choose maximum speed?
You have to work twice as hard to enforce quality control, to get constant balance.
Let's start with the classic, the military model applied to design, the pure hierarchy.
The pure hierarchy. This is your traditional studio ladder. It have a crystal clear singular chain of command. Every single decision strictly moves up one level for approval, and then it moves back down.
So the studio director only reports to the principal, the project architect only reports to the studio director.
And the designer only reports to the PA. It's a straight line.
The upside of that rigid structure seems obvious. You get maximum clarity and, really effective risk control. If something goes wrong, you know exactly whose desk it stopped at and who had the authority to approve it. Accountability is absolute.
And that's its strength. That's why it's often favored by, say, new firms that are just establishing their protocols, or firms that specialize in exceptionally high-risk projects.
Like hospitals or high-rises.
Exactly. Hospitals, high-rise residential, institutional work, places where these detailed mandatory checks are a legal necessity. Risk is minimized because you have these multiple singular gatekeepers.
But wait, that sounds incredibly slow. I mean, in today's market, which is so competitive, how can any firm survive sacrificing that much speed for clarity? The client always wants it faster, right?
And that is the core conflict. The major weakness of the pure hierarchy is that it's just so susceptible to bottlenecks and slow coordination.
Right.
If the project architect, who is the one and only decision maker for the technical solution, is in a client meeting, or worse, they're out sick for 3 days.
The entire technical team just stops.
The whole production stalls. The chain breaks. You can't road around the boss. So the firm sacrifices agility for safety, which often translates directly into missed deadlines.
That inefficiency leads us right to the second, and I'd argue most common model for any mid to large firm, the matrix organization.
The matrix is the standard for a reason. It tries to leverage specialized expertise while still maintaining project focus. The key thing to understand is that staff report to 2 leaders at the same time.
Okay, that dual reporting line. That's the engine, but also the potential failure point.
Absolutely. So who are those 2 leaders?
Yeah, let's break that down.
First, you've got the functional lead. Some firms call this the discipline lead. This is the person who owns the discipline and the firm's standards. So think director of technical documentation, or the specifications lead, or the digital practice director.
Their job is quality and consistency across all projects.
Exactly. And second, you have the project manager, the PM, who just owns that specific job.
Okay.
The PM owns the scope, the schedule, the fee, and the overall client relationship for that one single project. And the great strength of the matrix is efficiency.
Because you can share expertise.
You're sharing expertise. You can pull an expert curtain wall detailer from Project A to solve a really high-risk problem on Project B for a few hours. You're maximizing the firm's intellectual capital across the whole portfolio.
But the weakness seems so obvious, the dual authority. This is where all the internal friction must live, right?
It's famous for it.
So if the functional lead says, this detail needs 5 levels of sealant to meet our 10-year warranty standard, but the PM says, that takes 4 extra drafting hours and we only budgeted for 1, who does the junior staff member listen to?
And that is the collision. That is the classic matrix problem. It requires a massive amount of internal clarity. If your roles and your decision rights aren't made absolutely explicit, that dual authority leads to conflict, decision paralysis, and staff confusion.
All of which just increases project risk.
Rapidly. You need tools like the RACI matrix we're going to talk about later just to make this structure survivable.
Okay, so finally we have the third species. We see this a lot in practices that are all about rapid deployment or, integrated delivery like design build. This is the pod or team of teams structure.
Right. Think of these as small, high autonomy strike teams. They're cross-functional, so you'll typically have a dedicated PM, a project architect, a lead designer, a technical person, all focused on one project or a small group of related projects.
And they're sort of isolated from the rest of the firm's bureaucracy.
Geographically, conceptually, yes. And the strength here is tremendous speed and this really strong sense of team ownership.
They must feel like they're running their own little micro firm.
They do. They can move incredibly fast because they're not waiting for central functional leads to approve every little decision. They build a lot of internal trust.
But there's always a but.
There's always a but. The inherent weakness is systemic quality control. If you rely on that speed and independence without building in mandatory, intentional, and often external QA/QC checks, errors can compound very, very quickly.
And the team can become insular.
Very insular. There's a huge risk they stop adhering to the latest firm-wide standard because they're moving too fast to check.
So we see these structures are all very different, but regardless of which one you're in, ambiguity is the enemy.
So this brings up a really important question. When that ambiguity inevitably happens, what's the mandated professional solution? The critical thinking here for professional practice is that the solution has to be systemic. It's never personal. If a situation even hints at unclear responsibility, the firm has to intervene immediately.
To do what?
To clarify authority, to document the fix, and to route decisions through the correct signatory. So, for example, if a team member gets conflicting direction from the PM and the technical director, the immediate move is not to guess.
Right.
It's to force a meeting, clarify the specific decision, right? Is this a technical choice or a budgetary one? Document the agreed upon line of authority, and then move forward. You don't try to fix the person, you fix the process.
Perfect. That principle, that ambiguity equals liability. That really sets the stage for defining who the players are in these structures. Because here's the professional bottom line. Titles can seem all over the place.
Design technologist, senior associate.
Right. But the underlying responsibilities are highly codified. We can basically categorize every role into 4 distinct layers based on their authority and, more importantly, their risk exposure to the firm.
Let's start at layer 1. The entry or emerging professional. These are the people just starting out, often on their path toward licensure.
Okay.
This layer includes your interns, designer I, architectural associates, sometimes an early-stage job captain focused on a small piece of the work. Their main job is production.
Drafting, modeling, research.
Executing red lines, internal documentation. They're basically the hands and eyes of the firm, executing on established standards.
So from the firm's risk perspective, what is the crucial restriction on this layer?
The absolute restriction, and this is vital for risk management, is that they cannot independently commit the firm or interpret contracts.
Yeah.
Period. They are not authorized signatories.
They might coordinate a small drawing package.
But only under the direct supervision of a licensed professional. And for anyone managing staff, the core principle is this. You have to delegate tasks for productivity, but the ultimate professional responsibility for what they produce is never transferred from the firm or from you, the supervising professional.
The firm takes the hit.
The firm takes all the liability exposure for everything this layer produces.
Okay, moving up to layer 2. This is the project delivery core. These are the high-velocity engines that are actually producing the documents and managing the day-to-day work.
And this layer is defined by that crucial tension between the technical and the managerial sides.
Yeah.
The project architect, or PA, and the project manager, the PM.
Let's start with the PA.
Okay, the project architect is the guardian of technical integration and documentation quality. Their focus is running production, coordinating all the consultant structural, MEP, civil, and TUMP, making sure that the construction document set is coherent, it's buildable, and it's code compliant.
They own the artifact, the drawing set, the specs, the technical integrity of the thing. What are their decision rights?
They own the day-to-day technical decisions.
Yeah.
Can the duct run through this beam? What's the best standard detail for this transition? They answer those questions. However, they have to elevate any issue that concerns scope or schedule impact or significant risk up to the project manager or the principal. The PA finds the technical solution. The PM has to approve the financial impact of that solution.
Which brings us to the project manager. The PM is basically running a small business unit for that specific project.
The PM is the financial and contractual hub. They own the scope, the schedule, the fee, the staffing plan, who's actually doing the work, and all client communications that relate to contractual delivery.
They're watching the burn rate.
Constantly.
Yeah.
They're executing change management, and they're ensuring every single action the firm takes aligns with the contract.
So the critical distinction for you, the learner, is crystal clear. If the question is about budget, schedule, or the contract, it's PM territory.
And if the issue involves technical integration or constructability, it falls to the PA or maybe a technical lead.
Yeah, let's not forget the senior architect or technical lead in this layer, especially in firms doing really complex work.
Right. Their focus is often on those super high-risk details, system integration, material science, and leading the internal QA/QC reviews before the package ever goes out the door. They are the internal experts whose judgment saves the firm from claims.
So if a conflict comes up between the PA and the PM, and you know it will, what does that conflict typically look like? Give us an example that really illustrates that tension.
It's always technical quality versus time and money. Always. So for example, the PA might insist on using a highly specialized proprietary connection for a curtain wall because it offers better long-term performance and reduces future maintenance claims. That's a technical integration decision.
Makes sense.
But the PM, who's watching the CD budget, rejects this. They point out that the specialized detail needs an extra 40 hours of complex drafting and coordination.
Which will require more consultant reviews.
2 extra review cycles, putting the fee way over budget and risking the bid date. The PA handles quality. The PM handles control. They have to work together, but at the end of the day, the principal in charge has to make the call on whether the firm prioritizes long-term quality over the current stage profitability.
And that collaboration is managed by Layer 3, practice operations and the quality and risk systems. These are the internal directors focused on the health of the entire firm.
Right. Starting with the studio director or operations director. They're like the internal air traffic controller.
Like that.
Their whole focus is balancing staffing demands across all projects, managing performance reviews, handling resource allocation, and critically forecasting the firm's pipeline and capacity. They stop the firm from overpromising to a client when they know the staff just isn't there to support the work.
And then you have the preventative roles, the QA/QC director or the technical director.
These roles are all about institutionalizing knowledge. Their focus is proactive. They set the firm's standards, they develop the mandatory checklists, they conduct objective peer reviews of documents that are in progress.
And they keep the spec masters up to date.
Exactly. They maintain the lessons learned database. They are the firm's insurance policy against systemic failure.
So the insight here is vital for anyone aiming for a leadership role. If the problem you keep solving is we keep making the same mistakes on different projects, the solution is always systemic.
Always. The solution is standardization and implementing a robust, mandatory QA/QC process. It's not just asking individuals to pay closer attention or work harder. Heroics fail. Standardized systems succeed because they create these non-personal, auditable barriers against error.
Okay, finally we get to Layer 4, ownership and fiduciary responsibility. These are the people who accept the final burden of risk.
This is the realm of the principals and the partners. Their focus is totally holistic. They're setting the firm's overall risk posture. They hold final authority on big fees and proposals. They make firm-wide staffing decisions. And they determine the firm's legal posture on claims and lawsuits. They're the ones who sign the contracts. Per firm policy, yes. They're the ones who legally bind the firm.
And within that group, you have the managing principal or CEO president, the ultimate strategic leader.
Yeah, their focus is long-term. It's strategy. It's making sure profit targets are met, legal compliance is maintained, and, defining and stewarding the firm's culture.
So for the learner, the critical distinction here is between partners.
It is. These are the people who accept risk and set firm policy. But the equity partners are the true owners. They specifically share in the profits and the losses, and they hold governance power.
They vote on the big stuff.
The big structural changes, investments, capital expenditures. A non-equity partner might have a high title and be involved in management, but they don't share in that legal fiduciary risk or the profit and loss of the firm. That makes their authority fundamentally different, especially when it comes to long-term strategic decisions.
That distinction between equity and non-equity is so key because it clarifies that ownership is tied to legal and financial risk, not just how long you've been there.
Precisely. You get the highest authority only when you accept the highest level of liability.
So we've mapped the structure, we've mapped the roles. Now the question is, how does an emerging professional actually navigate this landscape? The journey from intern to principal, it's often not just one straight ladder.
It's not.
The firm structures we've talked about really necessitate specialized paths for advancement. Most firms recognize 3 distinct tracks.
And realizing this is a major career milestone. You do not have to become a project manager to succeed in architecture, and you don't have to be the lead designer either. Your value can be equally high on 3 totally different vectors.
Let's start with Path 1. This is the one that's often the most visible, the most publicized, the design leadership track.
Right. This progression moves from designer up through senior designer and design director, and eventually to a design principal. The metrics for success here are almost entirely external and reputation-based.
What do you mean?
Promotion depends heavily on demonstrated concept leadership, on winning competitive bids based on your design vision, and on maintaining client trust through consistent design excellence and innovation.
So they're rewarded for pushing the creative envelope while still, delivering a buildable product.
Correct. Their value proposition is that they secure future work and maintain the firm's creative brand. Design principal salary is justified because they're the rainmakers. They bring in the fees and keep the firm relevant.
Okay, path 2. This is the true backbone of the firm, the technical leadership track. These are the people who keep the firm solvent by mitigating claims.
Yep. The technical track progresses from job captain or PA up through technical director or QA/QC director and eventually to a technical principal. The promotion metrics here are entirely internal and quantitative.
Okay.
Success hinges on achieving demonstrably low error delivery across the firm's projects. It's about maintaining expert code mastery, understanding life safety and accessibility inside and out, and having impeccable constructability judgment.
Let's pause on that term for a second. Constructability judgment. For the learner, what does that actually mean in practical terms?
It's the ability to predict, before the document is ever issued, whether a detail, a material, or a system integration will be efficiently, economically, and correctly installed by the general contractor.
If you don't have that.
If you lack constructability judgment, your firm will be buried under requests for information, RFIs, and change orders. A technical principal's high salary is justified because they prevent claim liabilities that can cost the firm millions of dollars. They're a proactive risk reduction in human form.
Wow. Okay, and path 3, the management client track. This is the financial steering wheel of the firm.
This is the business path. Project architect to PM to senior PM, all the way up to principal in charge. Promotion here depends heavily on measurable financial performance.
So strong fee performance, staying on budget.
Staying within budget, strict staffing discipline, effective change management to minimize scopes creep, and consistently achieving high client retention rates. They get rewarded for predictability, for financial control, and for securing repeat business.
So this highlights a really critical distinction. If a project architect wants to move up to become a project manager, that promotion requires a fundamental shift in focus.
A huge shift.
It demands strong client communication and mastery of scope, fee, and schedule, even if their detailing skills are just average.
Absolutely. The skills shift from technical execution to contractual oversight. The firm needs to trust the PM to manage the money and the client relationship. The project management track, it really frames advancement in terms of measurable risk reduction and profitability.
Right.
If you can prove you reduce contractual risk and manage resources better than anyone else, that is your primary path to advancement in that management sphere.
Okay, so given the complexity of all these specialized tracks and the inherent friction in a matrix organization where different goals are colliding.
The technical leader wants quality, the design leader wants innovation, the manager wants margin.
Exactly. Firms need some kind of tool to prevent total internal chaos.
This is where the simple but profoundly powerful RACI matrix comes into play. It is the necessary governance tool that makes these complex org structures survivable.
How?
By explicitly defining authority for every specific task. It just neutralizes the confusion that comes from having multiple reporting lines.
All right, let's break down the acronym in detail. R is for responsible.
The responsible party is the one who does the work, or manages the team that does the work. They are the doers. So for drafting a detail set, this is often the project architect, the job captain, or a specific junior staff member. And you can have multiple responsible parties.
Okay, that makes sense. A is for accountable.
The accountable person owns the outcome. They provide the final sign-off or approval. And critically, there can only be one accountable person for any given task.
That's the risk holder.
That's the risk holder. If the task fails, the buck stops here. This is usually the PM for process and schedule tasks, or it's the principal for really high-stakes decisions.
Got it. C is for consulted.
The consulted party is someone whose input is required before a decision is finalized. This is a two-way communication loop. So, for example, before finalizing a material spec, the technical director must be consulted for firm standard adherence.
And the cost consultant has to be consulted for budget impact.
Exactly. And I is for informed.
Okay.
The informed party is just kept in the loop. It's one-way communication. They don't need to approve the decision, but they need to know what happened for future reporting or just general awareness. This might be the studio director for a change in staffing or the principal for some low-level day-to-day decision.
That breakdown is razor sharp. But in your experience, which of those 4 roles do most firms get wrong? Where does the conflict and friction usually come from?
Almost universally, firms confuse responsible, the R, with accountable, the A.
How so?
They assume the person doing the work is the one who's ultimately accountable for the outcome. If you have 5 people doing a task and they're all listed as R, you have to make sure only one person is listed as A. That's the person whose head rolls if the task is delivered late or it's wrong. When R and A get confused, delegation completely fails.
Let's make this concrete with the example from the sources.
Yeah.
Consultant coordination during the CD phase.
Okay. For a specific task like issuing coordinated life safety diagrams to the fire protection engineer, the project architect, the PA, is R. They're responsible. They physically gather the data. They manage the process.
Okay.
The project manager, the PM, is A, accountable. They are accountable because the quality and the timing of that coordination directly impacts the overall project schedule and fee. The technical director is C, consulted. They have to be consulted to make sure the life safety approach follows complex code standards.
Yeah.
And the principal is I, informed, because it's a critical milestone, but they don't need to sign off on it unless there's a major scope change involved.
That clarity is the firewall against all that internal confusion. Okay, let's put this into action. Let's use a detailed, high-stakes scenario from the sources. The services of KING-KAMBUF, PS, Intern, email incident. We need to see this organizational theory applied in real time.
This case study is perfect. It shows just how fast liability can escalate because of unclear authority. So we're talking about a large, fast-paced, 5-story, mixed-use project. The firm is on a compressed schedule with a CM at risk, so speed is everything.
And what's the incident?
You've got a new, highly enthusiastic intern trying to be proactive. They bypass the firm's established communication protocol and they email the CM directly, not through the PA or the PM. And they promise a simple change to an egress stair door swing, calling it a minor architect coordination item.
Wow.
The CM, who operates on speed, immediately forwards this written communication to the owner as architect-approved directed change.
The liability exposure there is immediate, and it is massive. You have an unauthorized commitment, a potentially code-violating change egress is life safety, and the client thinks the change is official. What is the immediate systemic response required to pull that risk back and adhere to the standard of care? The professional 4-step playbook.
Okay, step 1, stop the bleed. And this has to happen the same day. The PM, who is the accountable party for all contractual and schedule matters, must immediately send a clarifying email to the CM and the owner.
What does that email say?
It has to clearly state that prior staff communications are not formal directives. It has to reaffirm that official direction comes only from the PM or PA, explicitly referencing the contract. And crucially, the PM copies the principal in charge. That action mitigates the immediate contractual risk.
So you're not blaming the intern yet. You're just neutralizing the legal danger of that email. What's step 2?
Step 2, reestablish and document authority. The firm must immediately update and circulate the project responsibility matrix. This is where they'd use or refine the RACI for communication tasks. They set a firm-wide, clear external communication rule.
Which is?
All technical clarifications route through the PA for technical accuracy. All contractual, time, and cost issues route through the PM for fee and schedule compliance. This formalizes the firewall against unauthorized commitments.
Okay, so this institutionalizes the rule so it doesn't happen again. Step 3 focuses on internal education.
Yes. Step 3 is train and document. The leadership has to organize a mandatory brief communications protocol toolbox talk for the whole project team, especially new hires. This session has to clarify the critical difference between internal drafting notes and a formal, binding interpretation or directive. And then that lesson gets immediately added to the firm's standard onboarding materials.
And step 4, the final layer of protection and process improvement.
Step 4, risk check and systemic fix. The PA verifies the code implications of that door swing change to make sure it doesn't violate life safety or accessibility. The technical director then spot checks the entire life safety system to ensure no other corners were cut because of that compressed schedule. And finally, for the long term, the firm stops relying on casual email strings as documentation.
Right.
They create templates for external communication, and they commit to using only formal records, meeting minutes, sketches, bulletins, addenda as official decision records.
This raises a really important question. Why is this 4-step systemic action the professional imperative, as opposed to just blaming or firing or aggressively reprimanding the intern?
Because the primary risk wasn't the intern's single action. The primary risk was the systemic organizational flaw, the unclear authority and communication protocol that allowed that enthusiastic action to be interpreted as a binding directive by the CM.
So the system failed.
The system failed. The correct professional move is always to clarify authority, document the fix, and align communication with contractual roles. You don't rely on punitive measures against an individual who simply didn't understand the high stakes of professional liability.
The entire organizational structure we've defined, from the 4 layers of titles to the RACI matrix, it's all designed to reduce risk. But reducing risk is inextricably linked to maintaining profitability.
Absolutely.
If the firm is structured wrong or staffed inefficiently, the fees that the PM fought so hard for just evaporate. Let's dig into the hard economics of architectural practice.
Yeah, the organization chart isn't just a risk diagram, it's also a profitability diagram. And to visualize this, we use the staffing pyramid diagram, which shows the necessary structure for a profitable labor model.
Okay, describe that necessary triangle for us.
At the base, which has to be the broadest part, you have your highest volume of staff, emerging professionals, interns, junior associates. They handle the bulk of production, and they have the lowest billing rates, which makes their documentation time affordable to the client.
Okay.
In the middle, you have the essential coordination and delivery engines, the PMs and the PAs. They have mid-level billing rates, high utilization targets, and they're responsible for efficient output.
And at the top.
At the top, the narrowest point, you have the principals and partners, the few. They command the highest billing rates, but they should be spending the lowest number of hours on pure billable production.
So the biggest risk to profitability is the flipped pyramid. If you have too many senior staff doing work that's meant for juniors, the financial model just breaks.
It shatters the model. If a $280-hour principal or senior technical director is spending time updating keynotes or detailing a standard window head tasks an entry-level associate could handle at $100 an hour, the firm is burning money.
You're paying senior rates for entry-level work.
Exactly. The project fee, which was calculated based on efficient staffing, is immediately eroded. And what's more, the client might push back and argue they shouldn't pay principal rates for production work, which leads to fee write-offs. You have to staff the task complexity, not just who's available.
And how do firms actually measure if their staff allocation is working? That brings us to utilization, a metric that's critical for firm health, but also for individual career advancement.
Utilization measures the percentage of an employee's total time that is dedicated to chargeable, client-specific project work. This is the metric that determines if the firm is covering its overhead and generating profit.
Okay, let's use the sources worked example calculation to make this concrete. Say an emerging professional is contracted for 44 hours a week.
And let's say they dedicated 32 chargeable hours directly to client projects this week. The remaining 12 hours are non-chargeable.
So those 12 hours, that's admin tasks, firm-wide meetings, professional development, maybe helping out on a proposal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Non-chargeable time is vital for firm infrastructure. It funds mentorship, internal QA/QC standard development, legal risk review, pipeline development. It's necessary, but it doesn't directly generate project revenue.
So the utilization rate is 32 chargeable hours divided by 44 total hours, which is, what, about 73%?
Or it's approximately 73%.
And what should we take from that number? What are the industry benchmarks?
For entry-level staff and mid-level project architects, 70 to 80% is often considered a healthy target. PMs might aim a little lower, maybe 65 to 75%, because they're spending more time on non-chargeable things like proposal writing and admin oversight.
And principals.
Principals who are focused on governance and business development, they often have a much lower target, maybe 55 to 65%.
Let's talk for a second about the strategic importance of that non-chargeable time. It's often seen as wasted time, but you said it's necessary. Why is that?
Well, if a firm pushes utilization too high, say 90% across the board, it causes two critical problems. First, staff burnout accelerates, which leads to high turnover.
Yeah.
Second, and more importantly for risk, if staff have zero non-chargeable time, the firm's essential infrastructure just collapses. There's no time for mandatory peer review, no time for updating firm standards, no time for mentoring juniors. High utilization introduces significant error risk. You're trading immediate profit for long-term claims exposure.
On the other hand, what's the warning sign if utilization drops significantly?
If utilization drops to, say, 50 or 60% for a sustained period across the firm, that is a severe warning sign. It signals a systemic workload or pipeline issue. The business development team isn't winning enough profitable work.
Or
Or it signals a problem with misassigned tasks. It means senior staff are idle and the firm is carrying a high payroll cost against low revenue generation.
So let's apply the professional imperative here. If a firm's utilization is dropping significantly across its mid-level staff, what's the best strategic move to address that financial risk?
The best move is multifaceted. First, you have to adjust staffing levels, downsizing or reducing hours, to align your cost basis with the current work volume. Second, you immediately improve pipeline forecasting with the business development team to predict future needs.
And third,
You align task level. You make sure that any work that is available is being performed by the appropriately salaried staff member, junior staff, doing junior work. That maximizes your billing multiplier. Just asking staff to work more hours won't solve the underlying problem of low revenue.
this entire framework of organization and utilization, it's all built to protect the firm's bottom line and its legal standing. So let's wrap up by looking at the hard, non-negotiable rules of liability and professional ethics.
We have to reinforce the core principle of delegation versus liability, especially for anyone pursuing licensure.
What is that core professional principle?
Delegation is necessary for efficiency and profitability. A principal cannot check every single line on every drawing, but the ultimate professional liability for the service provided remains irrevocably with the firm and the licensed signatories, the principals.
So even if the firm has a great QA/QC system and the review is delegated to the technical director,
The liability does not transfer to that director as an individual. Delegation is a mechanism to meet the standard of care by having multiple experts check the work. It is not a mechanism to transfer the professional liability away from the legal entity.
the firm's system is just evidence of due diligence, but the firm still carries the burden.
Precisely. The liability for the overall output always stays at the top.
Let's look at a critical ethics issue that touches directly on the titles and responsibilities we've been talking about: misrepresenting authority.
This scenario is a classic ethical flashpoint. A principal tells a newly licensed architect who is focused on technical delivery to use the title project manager in their email signature for clients.
Saying it will lend more confidence.
Right. But then clarifies internally that the architect won't actually control fees, scope, or schedule.
Why is this an ethical violation and a major liability risk? It just sounds like marketing spin.
It is a critical ethical violation.
Oh.
Titles must align directly with actual responsibility and decision rights. Misrepresentation fuels claims and liability because you are intentionally creating a false expectation for the client. If the client thinks they're talking to the project manager who controls the budget, and that person continually says, "I have to ask my boss for the fee change," the client feels misled, trust erodes, and any claim they file will reference the firm's misrepresentation of authority.
So the correct action is just transparency.
Use the correct title, project architect, assistant project manager, whatever it is, and make sure the client knows who the genuine accountable party is for fee and scope decisions.
Finally, let's revisit the idea that systemic problems need systemic controls. If you see a consistent pattern of drawing errors, let's say missing consultant coordination in details, and it's appearing across multiple projects with different teams, what is the most effective and professional firm-wide fix?
You have to avoid what we call heroics. Asking PMs to just work harder, or even worse, eliminating necessary peer reviews to speed up deadlines. That actively increases risk. The most effective firm-wide fix is always implementing standardized QA/QC milestones and mandatory checklists that are integrated into the firm's project management software.
Because systemic errors require systemic controls.
You embed the quality check into the process structure itself. You make the failure point structurally impossible.
That concludes this incredibly detailed deep dive into KING-KAMBUF's professional practices on firm organization. We've covered a lot,
Yeah, we have.
from reporting structures all the way to profitability metrics.
And if you internalize nothing else from this deep dive into firm organization, risk, and careers, please remember these 4 governing rules of professional practice.
Okay, rule 1. Authority must be explicit. Use tools like RACI and responsibility matrices to get rid of all ambiguity.
Rule 2. Document decisions and roles. If it wasn't captured in a meeting minute, a formal bulletin, or a responsibility matrix contractually, it didn't happen, and the firm is exposed.
Rule 3. Match staff level to task risk. Don't put emerging professionals on highly complex, high-risk tasks, and never put a high-cost principal on production work that can be delegated. This protects your fee and your liability.
And Rule 4. QA/QC is a required system, not a personality trait. Quality is a process that has to be intentionally built into the workflow, regardless of who is working on the project.
Brilliant. So if we connect all this to the bigger picture, understanding firm organization is really just understanding the precise flow of risk.
Hmm.
For you, the listener, the key is recognizing that management roles, especially the project manager, are all about contractual control. Control of resources, control of time, and most importantly, control of contract compliance to make sure the firm gets paid and stays out of court.
We've seen how clear roles can prevent chaos and protect the bottom line. So tonight, we challenge you to take a moment and make this knowledge practical. Sketch a sample matrix org chart for a hypothetical 25-person firm. Map out those dual reporting lines.
Okay.
Then, draft a mini ICI for a significant high-risk project milestone. Let's say submitting the first round of structural details to the city for permit review. And drill yourself on who is accountable, the PM, the PA, or the principal for scope, quality, and fee performance in that specific moment.
That's the difference between theoretical knowledge and professional action. We'll see you next time for more Talkin' Shit with King-KAMBUF.
Until then, stay curious and always keep your utilization rates healthy.